Thank you, guys. We're assembling the band now. The band are getting together. JP, you've got to come up as well. This is going to be the shortest headline event at the Pyramid stage of Glastonbury PPAs. We are kept to, 20 minutes?
Let's do until 12:35, yeah.
Okay, we're at 20 minutes. So I'm going to do 4 questions. If I could painfully ask you all to be very concise in what you're going to say. And then I'll open it up to maybe 1 or 2 very short ones from the floor. We've just spanned quite a few areas. We've had Zana just do the digitalization piece. You've just done the kind of contracting side, and James on legal. I think just to take a bit of a broader step back, it'd be really interesting to hear more broadly from you guys about what you think are the biggest forces shaping the PPA markets today, and how you think maybe 2025 has been a bit of a moment in time that's changed those dynamics. JP, I might start with you.
From our perspective, the forces, which is well placed there, driving the PPA side now is flexibility. So different corporates want a different kind of evolution in the market. So something that we're seeing is a little bit of less interest in additionality and more interest in compliance. So basically, like less interest in I need this PPA to be built, and more like I want those certificates and I want the power from that specific asset to be like directly correlated to my consumption, which basically helps in the long term with additionality, because more developers have more interest in the prices fluctuate, and then they can build more assets. But that's something we're seeing now, like more like shorter tenures, a lot of interest for shorter tenures, a lot of interest for mixed wind and solar technologies. And we're seeing quite a lot of smaller volumes as well. Short tenures, smaller volumes, more kind of hybrid.
Yeah, and a lot of, I guess with the UK as well, collocation coming to the fore, trying to see some mixed and blended stuff. Helen, shall I jump to you?
Yes. So I would agree with all of that, and then just add as well, price security is quite a big one for our buyers. There's a lot of global uncertainty. They have the kind of relatively recent memory of what happened after COVID, the energy price shock, and how quickly prices rose during that. So I think to hedge against anything like that could easily happen again in the future, and so to kind of really defend themselves, locking in at a stable price stay is good. The only counter to that is it's difficult for, I think, a lot of companies to be certain that they're getting a low price against the market, because the forward curves are softening quite considerably, and it's so they want that stable price, but they don't know if it's the right one.
Yeah. How are you having just that is what I've been thinking about a lot recently, and how are you starting to have those conversations about negative pricing, PPAs? How are you kind of offering that open to them as an opportunity?
Yeah, it's tricky to persuade some buyers, but we quantify it. So the way we do it is we just give them the charts, and we do the NPV analysis, and it's still with the right numbers and a competitive price, it's still a good time to lock into a deal in the UK.
Yeah. So the proofs are there.
Yeah, for wind and solar. And in markets like Spain, the cannibalization really is quite severe.
Yeah.
So there, it works best if you have a hybrid. You have a mix of wind and solar.
Okay, super interesting.
But I'm sure, that could easily be arranged in the UK as well. And if and when that needs to come, that could be something that's offered as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Super interesting. James?
I obviously agree with both those, particularly on the pricing point. On negative pricing, there's obviously mechanisms that you can build into PPAs to provide a bit of comfort and security that allows generators to still get a position which is a bankable PPA, but also protects the buyer from sort of an embarrassment position where it's paying more than it should be at a given point. And normally a sort of an agreement or an arrangement to curtail with some sort of financial benefit for the guarantor, for the generator in that case. I come at it from a different way slightly. Instead of looking at the instead of looking, I suppose, at the buy side and what the buyer wants, but also looking at it from the supply side. CFD rounds are a really big, driving factor for the availability of corporate PPAs on the market. Because we all know what happens as AR rounds come to get closer and closer and closer, negotiations start to slow down, and people start to hedge their bets ever so slightly, and then you're wondering whether then if you're a corporate and you haven't closed a deal yet, you're wondering whether you're going to get a chance to close a deal or it's going to get sucked into the next allocation round. So that's a big driving factor, and of course it drives price. And then if you come out and the project hasn't got a CFD, then there's a bit more competition again, and you're as a buyer in a bit of a better position to hold your nerve on pricing.
Yeah, and just to add to that, so we're starting to introduce something in our contracts to kind of compete with CFDs on the negative pricing, which is that in the event of negative pricing for a CFD contract, you don't get awarded any revenue, but you can actually build it into a privately arranged contract that you do. So it's not necessarily something that benefits the buyer, but it's attractive for the sellers because then they still get recompense in those hours, which will be increasing in number as we approach 2030.
Can you tell that we're negotiating a PPA together at the moment?
Yeah.
There's some subtle hints.
Yeah. When I say a band, they know each other incredibly well.
We're already in a band.
You're in a band.
I'm the odd one out. I'll be representing the band.
Yeah.
That's always. Trust JP to get the good deal.
Well, you've just brought up something really interesting there, which we discussed a little bit in our call that we had last week, which is common pitfalls in PPA negotiations and maybe things that people aren't aware of. And I just want to go again in that same order and just talk about what are the common pitfalls and what do people need to be more aware of. So you're the head of the band. You've got to go first.
Okay. So there's a lot of what we've seen now with the greenhouse gas protocol scope 2 update. There's a lot of nervousness around, if is a PPA that I want to sign the correct one? Does it matches my consumption profile? So we've seen, like in Bruno's slides, the market is in a kind of stabilization phase where they're trying to kind of work out what's coming. Like, are there any projects that have hybrid wind, solar, and battery storage? We haven't seen that many of them, but the market is kind of wondering, am I doing the right thing? Is this the right profile? Is it like, I don't know exactly what's my consumption profile on an hourly basis, so I better find that out first before signing another PPA. Yeah. So what we're seeing is corporates being a little bit more cautious about what kind of PPA they sign, what's the availability, and obviously price is taken into consideration a lot. But in the legal framework, I think James, you'll be much better positioned to tell us about that.
Common pitfalls. I mean, it's not the one that no one knows about. It's the one that everyone knows about. The PPAs take too long to close. Yeah. They take too long to negotiate. It gets drawn out. And again, not to repeat what I've just said, but the big issue, if any deal gets done from the moment you do, as everybody knows, in any deal, if you agree the terms and it takes too long to sign the deal, too many things can happen. Too many variables, whether it's particular business variables with that particular buyer, particular issues with a particular project, macroeconomic issues. So many different factors can get in the way. I was managing a tender process for a very large corporate that was, for no reason of its own, had to delay its tender process, had to put a stop on its tender process. It had 17 great prices in from different projects, all over, to meet its huge capacity from all over from loads of different generators. Right at the time that the energy crisis hit and Russia invaded Ukraine. And then about 6 months later, everybody had dropped out. They then got presented with generators' own tenders. Would you like to tender for our volumes? She was very, very quickly on the other foot. And that was one extreme example, but just taking too long. You can have change of personnel, change of CFO within a business. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this deal? It's just the re-education of that particular stakeholder. You need individual buy-in. As I said, a lot of these buying decisions, we all know there are corporate decisions, but made by individuals. It's a very personal thing, and once things take too long, too many things can get in the way.
Yeah, James and I were actually just saying before this, there's so much value in getting into a room, all in one place, and just hashing out a few of the really sore points. and actually it's not done enough. And I think, there's a sunk cost. So, once you've not done it, then you just think, we'll carry on with the calls. But actually, just a couple of hours could really help get momentum going again. My answer to that question was just going to be not hiring EY. You need a good advisor.
Absolutely.
Or any advisor. You should get an advisor.
No, don't.
We're not
don't
the
dilute it now.
BBC. You can advertise for yourself. JP, this is an interesting one for you though, because obviously we love data, we love digitalization, we love AI, and you guys are doing a brilliant job in bringing that forward. But I think to James' kind of subtle point during his presentation, is there a world in which you still need a bit of a human touch with all of this digitalization? And what's the kind of balance that you guys see in offering that digitalization and that data kind of thrive, but then bringing the kind of human element into it, like you're kind of speaking about, bringing people into the room?
No, I think lawyers will become redundant. No, I'm joking. No, obviously you need that personalization. I think what we focus on is to provide James with the exact data that he needs in order to continue the negotiations with the deal, right? Yeah. And basically, I think there is a world where AI will take over, for sure. And what we believe is deal structuring in terms of what data matches with which project, which project actually fits my consumption profile better, where are they, what are the terms, what are the price, all that kind of stuff. There's quite a lot of data there. But in order to get to that point, we need HI, human intelligence first.
Nice. I'm glad you said that because I just nodded and went, yeah.
we need basically like data, because basically the way that AI works is with vast amounts of data. And at the moment in energy procurement, we don't really have too much data that we can feed into the system. So for example, energy consumption on an hourly basis, energy production on an hourly basis, availability of products, what's the output of those products, what's the price trends. Once we start getting those feeds into the system, then that's exactly when we start like feeding into AI and then getting much better results. But at the moment, like for example, most corporates that we, and Zana alluded to that, most corporates that we deal with, they all use spreadsheets. And it's a very closed system that, you can lose the spreadsheet or the spreadsheet cannot open one day or whatever. And then if an energy manager wants to understand what the consumption profile is on the Italian side, they need to call the Italian manager and say, can you send me your spreadsheet? Yeah. And that is very, very, that's a big blocker for AI openness kind of thing.
I think we're seeing that across the energy industry, right? With grids, the management of grids, we need kind of centralized digital systems. It's why Google X does such a good job in Chile with having access to their kind of free data stream. And so I think we're seeing that kind of everywhere, which is super interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think there's potentially an opportunity. I say before about the human touch needed in some of these legal risk issues that I flagged before. Lots of these points, like changing law, is a great example. It's an unknown thing. It's very, very difficult to quantify. Some of the risks can be more easily quantified. What's your mark-to-market exposure on an early termination? You can run some models. You can run, a worst case, a medium, and a better case scenario, and pick a point, and you can sort of start to quantify that. I think as we get more information and data as to how PPAs operate, that data is put through AI, and we start to see what is actually happening, what's on the horizon, what could happen, and how it could be affected. It will help with the decision-making process, but someone's still going to have to make a decision. So that's the difference. I think we'll have more information on which to base it, because I sit in rooms with generators, I explain the risks, I explain the issues, I try and give as much of a steer as possible as to what I'm seeing in the market. They still have to make a decision, and sometimes it's just feel. It's just gut feel. So if that gut feel can be informed more accurately and more reliably by data and the interpretation of that data through AI, I think I see that the sort of natural progression. And that's how we're working with Shoosmiths exactly. So basically, we're compiling that data, crunching that data, making sure that buyers and sellers understand what hourly matching is, how the volumes match, and the pricing is agreed and stuff. And then we convey that information through a term sheet that it's conveyed to Shoosmiths so they can continue the negotiations with verifiable
like data, live data, basically.
Yeah. I think what all of you are speaking to is education, right? It really can't be underestimated how much education is still around PPAs, like new entrants into the market really, really are desperate for and really are necessary. Okay, I'm going to do one final question from my side. Please keep it very short, and then I'm going to open it up to the floor. If you had to pick one capability, digital, legal, or strategic, that buyers underinvest in today, but will be essential over the next decade, try not to pick your own. What would it be? What would it be? What's underinvested into by buyers?
I would say legal.
Thank you. Oh, wow, that was unexpected.
Okay.
This wasn't rehearsed.
You want to get invited to Shoosmiths again next year?
Yeah.
Thank you.
But seriously, I think like you need to understand what are the legal implications of a PPA before you even start the negotiations.
Yeah.
Because like as you were saying, quite a lot of like PPAs get stuck in the last mile because companies don't really understand legal risks and legal frameworks. And you noticed, like you mentioned 5 that are super important, or 6 that are super important. Like you need to understand what your legal implications are and your risks before you even start negotiations, or to understand if a PPA is right for you or not.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think like I think even before that though, as part of that process, the strategic coherence across the group that are deciding on the PPA, like representatives from legal, accounting, sustainability, procurement, and finance. Like there needs to be like a kind of subcommittee that come to all the meetings, and they need to come to them from the beginning, because we've had a process that's stalled because they sort of didn't do their due diligence at the beginning, and we're still getting very basic questions from quite senior stakeholders that could have easily been answered at the beginning, but now we've got kind of some good prices hanging from generators that we're waiting to execute on. But that's frustrating for the sellers, and then the buyers are also not kind of ready to move, but they could have easily been if they'd got their ducks in a row.
Yeah.
So I think it's and then to your point about losing time, like time is very key. You're going to lose those good prices, and we know they're good. So it's frustrating for us as well, because we're thinking like, you're so silly, you're losing this deal, but it's just. I don't think it's necessarily like financial investment, but it's kind of resource investment in strategy.
Yeah. Bringing people along on the journey with you. Yeah.
And I'll just take the last one then. I'll take digital. No, it has to be. You've got all these people in a room, and what are they looking at?
Yeah.
They're looking at data. They need to be looking at the right kind of information, and that's not a spreadsheet.
Yeah.
That has to be far more sophisticated than that. If you're still looking at a spreadsheet, and you're a big corporate buyer, you need to be smarter and just get some better processes in place to deal with that.
My band is so great, they all gave a different answer, which is perfect. I'm going to open up to the floor. Anybody got a question? Front left here.
Hello, Gabriel from Octopus Energy, former Renewabl, so really good to be here. I think this question is a little bit like the elephant in the room regards legal and hourly match. Are we gonna get in the legals of hourly match in a contract, in a CPPA, correct? Who's gonna bear the risk? This is very related to, for example, availability guarantees. I don't know if mostly I think the audience have seen that pushing nowadays an availability guarantee for both buyers and sellers is really hard. All the buyers we want it, all the sellers don't want it. Yeah. And at the end, then how the hourly match clause is gonna work. Correct. So the buyers want the hourly match, and we have done a great kind of role on pushing hourly match. Energy Tech has done its job on pushing it, the same as the climate group. Mm-hmm. But I don't think that financiers and legal are there in the sense of how the clause is going to be structured. Okay, who's going to bear the risk? What happens if you don't achieve 80% of the hourly match? Who needs to pay the liquidated damages? Is it the seller or is it the buyer? Because if it is a seller, then we are in a world that only the big energy companies will be able to participate in these tenders.
Yeah, I think that's valid. I think, to be honest, there's not that much chat in the legal space on hourly match at the moment, because we're not seeing a great deal of it coming through in the PPAs that we're working on through those tenders. Well, I'm not anyway. But if it is coming through, it will have to be dealt with and it'll have to be addressed. As to who bears the risk, not as a cop-out, but it wouldn't be us as lawyers determining who bears that risk. It will be the counterparties deciding who is best placed to take that risk and whether they can. But I agree with your point. I think if buyers are tendering on the basis on which they are not willing to take that risk, then it's going to be pushed to the sellers, in which case it goes much more to the large supply arms of large energy generation businesses rather than anything else who can manage that. Sorry, not the most satisfying response, I'm sure.
Apologies, I'm really struggling with the cognitive dissonance between the previous session, which was about looking at spatial and temporal matching, and a lecture from EY about how virtual PPAs are exactly the same as physical PPAs, when in fact they can lead to a massive misallocation of resources on the grid that then create grid congestion that aren't physically connected through to the person who's actually using the energy, and lead to all sorts of grid problems which basically then NESO and others have to manage. So how do we deal with this kind of disconnect between what we're trying to achieve to make the grid work and what businesses are trying to achieve to kind of come up with workarounds that minimize their costs?
I don't know whether it's a confusion between virtual and physical, but between a physical offsite and a virtual offsite in the GB market, neither of them are delivering direct electrons. So, a virtual PPA is just a different way of settling the payment.
Yeah.
So
as generated power, unless there's curtailment or storage, it's still going into the grid at the same time.
That's a different question. I think you were talking about NESO in the UK. Yeah, cross-border PPAs. Yes, there's a sort of tension there. Between whether you do a PPA just for your own location, your own grid, but then you'd be sizing a lot smaller just to do that, and in which case it may not even happen at all. So it's this tension between, do you want PPAs to happen or not? And I think there's the sort of balance between, doing something that's going to enable PPAs, albeit with some basis risk and some challenges on the grid, or not. Let's catch up. It's a difficult one. There's not a right or wrong, but I did want to just emphasize again that there is no difference if you're in a zone between a physical offsite PPA and a virtual offsite PPA. Nothing.
Brilliant. I am going to have to sadly close there. I could do this for hours. Can I get a massive round of applause for the best band ever?
Thank you.